Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the November poetry reading of Cafe Muse. Thank you, Michael Davis, for sharing your beautiful classical guitar performance. I'm Susan Oki, and I'm hosting the reading tonight, along with our series founder, Karen Alanier. Our technical guru, Henry Crawford, is behind the scenes. We're proud that Cafe Muse is in its 22nd year of outstanding literary programs. Our featured poets tonight are Michael Davis, whose music you just enjoyed, and Beth Konkoski. Karen will introduce Michael, and I will introduce Beth. We encourage you to buy our featured authors' books tonight and to donate to Cafe Muse to support our literary programs. You can find the links for buying books and for making a donation in our chat. You may notice that audience members have been muted. This will help to prevent feedback problems for our readers and ensure uninterrupted programming. Please bear with us if we do encounter any technical glitch. During the reading, you may use the chat to comment or to ask a question that our readers may answer during the Q&A period after the readings, if time permits. The program is scheduled for 1 hour. Our next Cafe Muse reading will take place on Monday, December 7th, and will feature poets Judith Bowles and Rose Solari. And now Karen Alanier will introduce our first reader.
Thank you, Susan. I'm honored to present to you tonight poet Michael Davis, who many of you know through his classical guitar music that we at the WordWorks began to hear on Jacqueline Potter's back porch after poets read at the Joaquin Miller cabin in Rock Creek Park so many years ago. For 2 decades, Michael taught poetry to elementary school children in Arlington, Virginia's Pick a Poet program. In 1999, Micah Press published his chapbook Upon Waking. His work has graced the pages of Poet Lore and Gargoyle, as well as had airtime in internet journals such as Innisfree. Prodigal from New Academia Publishing makes available his first full-length collection. Michael is a master of depicting the human condition, and in his new book, Prodigal, where we see him grappling with his father and others who people his life. The best way to understand Michael is directly. I particularly love what he does in the poem Lies and Dreams, and here are a few lines. You had a pocket of dreams till you emptied it out in one of those streams that flows to the sea. Grace Cavallari, Maryland's Poet Laureate, writes of Prodigal as following: this poet's lifelong pursuit of classical music, lucky for us, now brings his personal language as music to our hearts. Please welcome Michael Davis.
Thank you all very much. It's a great honor to be here. Thank you, Karen. That was a wonderful introduction. And I mean, it's a great pleasure of mine to get an opportunity to read from my book in front of such a great group and this great reading. I was going to start with the, I think I got about 10 poems I was going to read, and I was going to start with the title poem of the book, The Prodigal. These things to me kind of came out of, you know, this whole idea of home and going and coming, and then there was a bit of father and son and sons and the structure of the home and stuff like that. So I picked a number of them to illustrate that. So The Prodigal. Each sound from the carnival slips over the garden wall like a thief after apricots in the bower where now he rests, remembering his lady's kisses and the taste of the wine. At the door, on the day of his return, the servants smirked and his brother hissed, "Old fool," at their father, but only the prodigal heard. The air is still, in the distance a calliope pipes, calling him back to the wheel. The rose in his hand is just a dying flower on a dying stem. Where is the world where things have not been plucked or replanted? A servant calls from the kitchen that the feast of return is ready. The family will gather. The sun picks a yellow fruit dangling from an unpruned branch. The meal may cool. His teeth plow a furrow to the pit. The juices rise wildly behind his eyes. Now this next poem, this was a painting by Lucian Freud that I saw in the Persian Gallery many years ago, an exhibit of his. And it just kind of, it was like someone had come into this room and seen this woman who looked up as if maybe she'd never seen the person at the door before. It was a portrait of Lucian's first wife. And I called it "The Lover Should Not Have Returned," and I have a bit of a epigraph from Sir Thomas Browne. We term sleep a death, and yet it's waking that kills us and destroys those spirits which are the house of life. When I entered the apartment and found you sitting in that exquisite robe, a wedding band gleaming dimly on the penultimate finger of your left hand, forelengthened in the bedclothes, I knew I had lost you. Sheets of mud fell from my rotting shoes, and the hall loomed in the sheen of your eyes like a reflection clinging to one last ascending breath. There was nothing behind them. Your right hand cupped a breast, as simply as if it were the knob to a door that you might open or close, and below that hand our whippet lay, asleep or waiting to lunge. I could no longer tell. Her thin, hairless tail curled beneath a flank. From behind her slitted lids she stared, as if to guard a tomb. So still she might have been cut from stone the moment before. She made no move to leap in greeting or rub in my old spell. I leaned and whispered in your ear, be sure to bury your dead deep, or they'll rise like the drowned to poke their moldering snouts from beneath the skirts of lilies. You covered your breast with dark silk. I turned to the door, unheard. My footprints backed out, trailing earth to the fields. One of the things my father used to do is smoke. My whole family smoked for the longest time, including myself, but I haven't done that about 40 years. So this is kind of a memory of him and that kind of, this kind of somewhat sacred ritual of smoking in a way, drawing the flame. Once, the darkness of an evening on any street would be punctuated with the snap of a match, the flick of a lighter, followed quickly by the cupping of a hand, a face briefly illuminated, the quick cast of an eye, then, with the flick of a wrist, the snap of a thumb, darkness again. Where are we now in this holy place? The streets no longer peopled by those faithful mendicants wrapped in flame, seeing to their momentary need. Palms together, they have passed into the wind. Their breath one sharp uptake, a thin exhalation of smoke. This is another thing from one of the galleries downtown. I love the Persian art in the Sackler when it shows up. They had a nice, huge exhibit of these very fine miniature Persian paintings many years ago. So this one I entitled Persian Miniature, and it's about Tamerlane in India. Persian Miniature. Tamer sits on two rugs, one only partially unrolled, apart from his retinue. His wine bearers are frozen in gestures of offering. Across a small creek, whose voice will mingle with other melodies, musicians sit and pluck harp, tap tambourine. Fire of battle still smolders in the exalted one's eyes. An orange tree behind him offers untaken shade. The great city of India lies at his feet, taken. There is no parade. A simple shift covers his back. Violets embroider the grass carpeting the hillside. The music is not heard, nor the voice of the brook. The field lies ready for the scythe. Now this one gets back to some of those themes about the return home, the father waiting. I've turned it around. This is from the Odyssey, and it's entitled Telemachus, and it's got an epigraph, what Odysseus shouted at Polyphemus, they call me no man. Telemachus. The poet I dream, who tells my father's story, never gets the facts right. Blindly he imagines Odysseus only 20 years gone, young when he left, commanding when he returned, strengthened by his journey, at ease with his gods. Instead, I find him 30 years out, dim-eyed, toothless, no muscle on his bones, his wife dead, house ransacked, bow unstrung, broken. He brings back only a faint taste of the sea and a smell on his breath of decay, babbling about ruin, women who were not wives, a trip to Hades, and loss, how everything has been lost. Oh, he is happy to see me, if he could only remember my name. Firstborn, fruit of a tree that can no longer hold the twittering remains of our family and its thickened branches, long since chopped and burned. I watch him pick flotsam from the beach, net floats, driftwood, broken oars, piling them onto his pitiful offering to Poseidon. The poet I dream will have Odysseus launch his ship again and reserves for him a special place in hell. They do that, dreamers, I should know. But the part of the son who waited for his father's return will have no such fame. I have lingered too long in the dry hills of middle age for the return of no man, and find myself now fully rewarded. And since I'm a little bit in the Greek thing and the tail end of the Iliad and the Odyssey, this is another one, another kind of son story. This one about Achilles, basically, and his mother, in some respects, more than his father, but sunlight reflecting off clouds. No, it is off the face of Olympus, the wood below, the mirror lake, the stones stacked in remembrance, the light off the sea as the waves curl towards some mythic beach where Thetis and Peleus couple. The war will not be a good one for the child. First, she tempers him slowly over fire. Later, she cools him in the river, separating the living from the dead. She educates him with the best teacher, a weir horse, steeped in instinct and knowledge, but the empty sky offers no protection. Desperate, she schools him as a girl. But when offered by the Greeks, he chooses the sword. Let the linens go. Someone else will embroider the skirt, the tail, the winding sheet, and when it comes time, the chattering gods, the king's council, his brothers in arms, the screaming tube of collapsed air that is his fate, will sing to him as other blood pours from the city. He hears the voice of his mother, the voice of the daughter of wind and sea, wetted, keen, and high, what she could not help but let him know, the old murmuring lullaby. So those are from the collection. I have 3 poems I'm going to finish with. I dedicated the book to my father, and my father died at the end of May this year. And this I wrote not long after, basically on my experience, like going to take care of him the last few days of his life in the hospital with COVID-19. So it's I titled it "Welcome to the Pandemic." Each time the hospital grants me the mercy to sit with my dying father, a masked and plastic-gowned nurse greets me in the lobby. With a thermometer, with a trigger, she aims at the round of my forehead an inch away and pulls. There is no click. Here's a mask, she says, waving the way to the door to the elevator, ascending to the floor of death. Now, this is another Persian poem that I wrote recently. It's I love that music of Handel's The Arrival of the Queen of Sheba. And this is of a Persian miniature of Sheba receiving a note from Solomon, like inviting her to his palace. The Arrival of the Queen of Sheba. Her eyes are fixed upon the hoopweed, concealed as birds habit in a bush. Her body, like the brook she lies beside, is as snaken and covered in silken scale. And there are her lips, ruby, always red, her head in her hand, languorous. In the creation she contains the world's patience. The hoopweed's tree is not the only tree. A more magnificent specimen rises behind Sheba, just as background. In the bird's cloven beak is a scroll. Sheba, like Suleiman, understands the beast. Why doesn't the bird just speak? Why does he bother to invite? We who have lived so long in the world have no need for writing. We understand Abraham's knife, Isaac's neck, the grave already dug, the blood blue ink is unnecessary. She could turn to the bird. The arm does not have to rise and fall. But Solomon is uneasy. Are her feet those of a donkey? Is she 1, 2, or 5-toed? It affects the coming dance deeply. She trips across the wave of dune. Jonah groans. The Leviathan opens its jaws. The horse paws dust at the trumpet's blast. The clouds beckon. In the palace, a skirt is lifted to keep the hem dry. The toe is shoed. Side-eyed goats in a wicker pen will bleat. The shadows of her legs move across the mirrored surface before his throne. Water, wind, and forest stir. Her retinue arrives. Be still, she says. I come in peace. And this one last one is a bit of a dream. I go back to the house. I go back to the family and a bunch of things. And this one, basically is kind of based on a bit of a dream I had once. It's called Real Estate. And I'm going to close with this. Real estate. I buried the old house in a new one. The old bedroom became kitchen, turned to dining room. Living room with wood stove became 2 rooms with an office, a place to sit by the pass-through fireplace. The newspaper called, but never came by. Bedrooms moved a story closer to the sky. In a spare up there, I could watch ravens wing across the sky blue void and meditate. Up the new stairs, eventually the cats died, as mother had decades before on the floor below. There were new stairs to climb and descend. The rain plows down gravestones. The old furniture is given away or left at the curb. The man across the street who moved in after the war never knew the place was there until late at night his pregnant wife saw the light through the Japanese honeysuckle. The street between the homes narrow and dirt. Another neighbor had an outhouse, owned a cow. One night a man came to me, explained my property had changed. Shanties leaned at the sides of the old yard and the 7-Eleven auto repair shop in the basement. The drive-through took a lot of space, sheltered many now. Consider the place a collective. Look how many it contains, he said. I made an appointment with a lawyer, transferred the deed. I'm in a new place now, smaller, but spread out. Those walls I loved, I let them go. What I left behind can have it all. thank you very much for bearing with me and listening.
Thank you so much, Michael Davis, for that stunning reading of your work. And I'll now introduce our second featured reader, Beth Konkoski. In Watershedding, her second chapbook, poet Beth Konkowski combines striking metaphors and taut, well-crafted lines to trace the speaker's cycle of change and renewal. These poems are vividly alive to the senses. The sound of a family coming slowly apart echoes in, quote, the scrape of our knives cutting roasted pork, the sawdust minutes of silence. The natural world, in both its generosity and its indifference, is powerfully evoked to convey emotional ties. As you might guess from the title, water appears in various roles. In one poem, a flash flood overwhelms the speaker as she sleeps on the couch, while in another, immersion in a river's fast current becomes rebirth for the speaker and her companions. Quote, 3 witches and the spell swirls to life with our conjuring arms. Beth Konkowski is a writer and a high school English teacher in Northern Virginia, where she lives with her husband and sometimes her 2 college-age kids. Her poetry has been published in journals such as the Potomac Review, the American Journal of Poetry, and Gargoyle. Her first chapbook, Noticing the Splash, was published by Bone World Press in 2010, and her second, Watershedding, was published by Finishing Line Press in 2019. For the last several years, she has helped organize and host the Joaquin Miller Poetry Series, another WordWorks public program, and has been a featured reader in a number of DC area readings. Friends, please welcome poet Beth Konkowski.
Thank you so much, Susan. It's such an honor to be here. Thank you, Karen and Henry and Leah as well, and Cafe Muse. I've attended many readings, both at Friendship Heights and more recently when it moved to the Writers Center, and it's a great honor to be a part of things. So I will be reading a number of poems, some new ones toward the end, and I want to start with one that's a little bit of a, I guess a little bit of a jokey sort of poem from a news article that I listened to once. It's called Free Range Animal Crackers. Thank goodness, comes the report. The box no longer cages those magnificent inked creatures. The news says bars do not hold back their regal cardboard haunches. Roaming the comic book plains, they are wild again in all their artificial glory. Their fictional young no longer face growing up in a circus of paper cages, subjected to the imaginary whip of a ringmaster or the illusory screams of frightened children. Their cookie heads can be bitten off in complete freedom. This is animal rights change at its finest. Awareness raised, shouts of victory for the cartoon animals are free at last. And this was after they had protested they didn't want the animals any longer to be behind bars on the box, and I thought that was sort of funny. I write often about my children, and I have had teachers and various other poets tell me that writing about your kids is risky because we all love them so much that no one's very interested in how much we love them. So I've tried to be careful, and oftentimes love is not the first thing one thinks of when hearing my mother poems. This one is called My Daughter Sings. There is hardly a moment when she lets a tune sit in silence or allows her words to go unsung. She choruses and trills, croons and laments, hums, chants, and repeats each hour some new refrain until I cannot refrain from screaming. The notes stick in my brain, never her throat, until I sleep, then wake to the grueling sounds she makes. But what kind of mother would hate the sound of her own child's voice? With my silence, I beg her to stop. Without rhythm or song of my own to answer, I plug my ears with wax like Ulysses' men and avoid the shipwreck of my anger, the capsizing flood of truth I might scream out. she's listening tonight, and she actually has a beautiful voice, but this was when she was really young and just sang repeatedly, repeatedly, repeatedly. Also, this is another poem for my daughter called Balance Beam. How do her toes know to grip the beam? Her hands hold varnished wood, slippery wood, and I hold my breath. Wonder again how her body, a body once suspended in the fluid of my body, can now kick herself upright on 4 inches of wood, suspended and holding, 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 feet again planted, her very cells balance in this twist the other way. Like grinning soldiers on parade, her fingers aligned, precise, and yes, joyful. Now she must tuck knees to chest, again no strings, no cord. My fear paws the ground, ready to charge, but she stays up, regains her surface, and glides to the dismount. I clap, call her name, cheer for this stranger, this daughter, balanced without me. My final mom poem is a little bit newer. I think a little bit about children growing up. It's called In Phases. In this trick of light we call years, I watch our kids grow. My heart believes such hunger is forever. The citrus fear I catch and bite, how the days of worry linger. It is my job with relentless desire to keep the planes aloft, the delicate pathways mowed. These protective charms require my attention, so I must dedicate myself, though they have grown most ungrateful for the clingy ways I try to keep them safe, and let's be honest, small. Now they pull away, eyes rolling, mouths dripping wisdom as only the safe and very young. I'll cry alone, try to begin anew. I have several poems for, I guess, my midlife crisis, maybe, being 50, and a little bit about being married for 30 years. This one is called Linger. We could perch on the details of this near end, how I have worn you as my skin for decades. Let every sense curve toward a blossom or fruit of your choice. Burning any fringe or edge you don't like, I beg to fit in your chosen mold, to slide like a wedge of orange between your teeth. Steps without you are shards or ribbons, weeds, cardboard boxes thrown in my path, and I have forgotten the muscles used for lifting. And this other one, also, I guess, about marriage, is called Obad. Once my legs might have wound like sapling roots around yours, our radar senses seeking just the breath of distance. Like swooping bats through gray, we could swing and hover, echolocate and attend to one another for hours. Waking bunched in sheets and blankets, the best of us lay strewn like dandelion seed. But now, most nights, only my side of the bed peels back and opens like a tulip. Your half remains unblossomed, a field clear cut, left fallow. I have worn out your soil, and you will not consider what we might plant this late season to bring you back. This is definitely a poem I wrote close to being 50 or just before turning 50. It's called Reincarnate, and I think it's a little bit about perhaps wondering why I always made some of the choices I made, I guess. In my next life, if I get one, I will be the damsel in distress, in need of a prince and a horse, or maybe an entire army to relieve my distress. Enough of this equality and independence. Tired as Sleeping Beauty and too skilled in the scrubbing arts, the serving and hauling required of the maid to an evil relative, I hang on the cusp of some prince's arrival. My problem? I take too much satisfaction in moving the couch myself. I am only now, as 50 looms, and the prospect of a hero to free me shrinks, seeing how furniture moved by the biceps and strain of another might conjure an enjoyable form of magic. And my mom is listening. I think she's the one who taught me to move the couch myself. As Susan said, I do have a poem. I actually have a couple of them that have some sort of witchiness to them, that perhaps are a little bit maybe in honor of the full moon the other night and the first full moon on Halloween since 1944. And so this one is called In the Damned River, and it is about the Racket River, which is the river I grew up on. It happens to have 27 power dams, the most of any in the country, which is just an interesting fact. We swim naked in copper water, 3 witches, and the spell swirls to life with our conjuring arms. Not far off rough rock trail, and easy to catch should anyone try, but we risk it for the magic of the current on our skin. We bounce and sag and bulge, nothing like dryads or nymphs, but once immersed, our limbs shimmer in this wet mirror and trick time beneath pine trees, perfecting August. This is also a witch poem. It's called Water Witching. I dream in a creek of language, spring runoff deep in words I can watch rush by. Dipping in my hand or parted lips, I flood with syllables and their slick potential. Their liquid promise is a cure, clamoring with the strength of one capsized and drowning. When the branch dives toward ground, diamond sure in this lemon breath angle of light, I know enough to pay attention, like the frogs or maple sap in February. Water tells its story, even as it hides the details and sloughs away bone. This one is called Luck, and I think most of us during the time, at least for me, of COVID, I just sort of stopped watching the news, and I just kind of wanted a day when I didn't hear bad news, and I think this was something I was thinking about when I wrote this poem. Luck. It doesn't take a 4-leaf clover, or maybe it takes many, to weave together days when nothing, no silver thing worth remembering, takes place. I want to be lucky enough to have such standstill hours, to look around and see each hatching blossom, find my breath in a shallow puddle glazed with sky. How long could I balance in such a mousetrap instant of stolen grace, numb to hope or the bellowing of a lie? I could slip through the veil of safety, collapse, and let no news rock me back to sleep. I beg for whittled time, hollow and with the echo deep enough to reach boredom's watermark. Cook, serve, chew, clean, repeat, a calendar to hold when chaos thunders near and luck hitchhikes out of state. This poem is also a fairly new one, and I came upon it, it sort of occurred to me when I realized how often during the pandemic I was, making my order from Amazon and just sort of getting my priorities, as so many of us, maybe perhaps a little bit in consumption. And so it's called Because I Lurk on Amazon, and I define a Wendigo here as a mythological cannibalistic monster from the Algonquian tribes in North America. We can be such Amazon Wendigos, spirits on the hunt with our purchasing power. Consumed by consuming, we grow fat and reckless. Debt and sorrow piling over our heads, we lose moonshine above honeysuckle, lighting up the night trail, or the velvet hours with a child we love. Quick clicks and packages only derail our sense of peace. But the planet can teach us otherwise. Let the mosses show us how to be small, and the cascade of spruce teach us to sway as one with linked boughs. If we ignore the allure of stockpiled stuff, our days alone with weather will be enough. I have, I think, 3 more. This one is a fairly short, that's actually a sonnet. It's called Anger Dreaming, kind of my angry COVID poem, I would say. I dream of red spray across highways, prowling through night's cover to constellate my rage. Graffiti, tall, screaming displays. If I could just carve out how much I hate these microbial villains, vagabond virus particles, and chemical pumps firing too much, too late, too soon. My ground down teeth and clenched arms long to punch and rip apart COVID, the shadow cells found in my sister's right breast, the soup of my son's disarray. Just fight fair, fists up. You've been concealed long enough. I'll take you all on. Each clinical playground bully puffed with pride or mean girl cancer, none of you can hide. So the last two, I guess, are sort of political poems. This one is my response. I've never written a villanelle before, and this was my response. I guess we all had responses to the protests and to all that was happening with George Floyd. So this one is called 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I've never read this publicly before. On the video, we hear, "Mama, I can't breathe," and then silence. His face on the pavement still. Even as the bystanders and cameras refused to leave, the police pressed him, needing to impose their will. And then silence, his face on the pavement still. The world watches, murals, fists, and protests arrive. Soldiers press them as ordered, impose his will, not seeing the option to share or find compromise. While the world joins in, murals, fists, and protests arise. Looting and kneeling look the same to those in power, not seeing the option to share or find compromise. The tear gas and weapons arrive by the hour. Looting and kneeling look the same to those in power, but the people raise their hands, trying hard to believe. The tear gas and weapons arrive by the hour. Millions around the world chant, "I can't breathe." And my final one is actually an older poem. It has to do with, most of you know the story of Icarus falling down into the sea. And there's the famous painting by Bruegel. And then there's also a poem by W.H. Auden where he sort of says, you know, no one ever pays attention to Icarus. He doesn't really matter that much. And so this poem is called "Why I Disagree with Bruegel and W.H. Auden and Current Government Officials." As for suffering, the old masters and poets and government officials may need some revision, for they ignore those who wait, who sit and wonder about a journey's completion. The old masters and poets and government officials may need some revision. Where is the thought for Icarus's mother, left to sit and wonder about a journey's completion, not made privy to her son's splash? Where is the thought for Icarus's mother? What would a mother say of waxed wings and the sun? No one suffers unregarded, she would say, even if she never knows of her son's splash. What would a mother say of waxed wings and the sun? Should anyone ever bother to ask, even if she never knows of her son's splash? We answer the terrifying phone in the empty pocket of night. Should anyone ever bother to ask, the ring sears nightmares, slaughters sleep, that terrifying phone we answer in the empty pocket of night, uncradling peace with the words we have longest feared. Such a ring, searing nightmares, slaughtering sleep, ends hope and dreams and love. Uncradling peace with the words we have longest feared, we inhale grief as it becomes ours. Ignoring hope and dreams and love, you old masters, poets, and government officials must need some revision, must acknowledge the grief as it becomes ours, for somebody always notices the splash. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Beth, for your engaging reading, full of truth and wisdom for how to exist in realities, sometimes not of our own making. What a wonderful evening of poets who are part of the WordWorks community. So let's begin the Q&A with this question. Could you, Beth and Michael, each talk about what music means to you as you write your poems? And let's start with you, Beth.
Well, I listen to a great deal of music while I'm writing often. I listen to a lot of classical music when I'm writing. I listen to a lot of Native American flute music. I listen to quite a few things just to sort of make things kind of happen in my head and to sort of make that space a little bit sacred. So I would say that that is a part of it. I've always worried and had to work pretty hard, not necessarily, I think, on the musicality of language, but I don't think I really understand all the syllable stuff, and so I have to kind of beat that out and think about it. I don't think I'm naturally someone who has that, but I do think that the way things sound, I always want to be musical, and I'm also very interested in music. I pay great attention to lyrics in songs, so I think those things are all true. How about you, Michael?
Me, yeah. The coda and the cadencia, kind of the endings. That is what I think of a lot of the time. Whether it's a stanza or something like this. But there's, I mean, actually, when Karen introduced me in Lies and Dreams, that poem there, I kind of thought of that as like a song, less than as a poem. Because it came to me as like not necessarily Cole Porter or something like this, but it had that's how it came to me. So every once in a while there's just, and then to go revisit is to be able to look at some of those things that, like, make the ending powerful, or tie it together in a way with how it runs and how it plays with itself. So it could be staccato here and more legato tied together elsewhere. So just to change the mood, move it along.
Michael, could I ask you to read that poem, because you didn't read that one tonight?
Oh, you want to hear that?
I do. I think it really speaks to the whole question of musicality, and we heard the villanelle from Beth. And that's
right.
What made me think that, both of you had this ear for.
Oh, I could read it. It's short. It was, it came to me in the kitchen because there was a jar of something on the windowsill. Where did I put that? Lies and Dreams. I've got a bag of figs. I've got a sty that's full of pigs with curly tails and shoveling noses, and all around it's covered in roses. I've got a bag of figs. I've got a jar of lies and a cake on the counter covered in flies with buzzing wings that lay their eggs. Their hairy tongues feast on the sweetening dregs. I've got a jar of lies. You had a pocket of dreams till you emptied it out in one of those streams that flows to the sea as quick as can be without a thought. You let it out. You had a pocket of dreams. We have a problem, it seems, with my lies and pigs and your let go dreams, the house with a cake on the counter and crumbs, and the roses climbing and twisting their thumbs. We have a problem, it seems. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for reading that. Beth, do you have anything else that you want to say on that topic of music before we move on to something else?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I suppose the musicality of things is largely in how they sound when you read them. So I love to read things, out loud, because that's when I know if they're working or not, I think, far more than when I just kind of see them on the page. So I've always done that with fiction and poetry that I write. So I suppose that's part of the musical sense in a way.
Yeah,
I definitely agree with that. Has anybody caught any other questions? I haven't seen any in the chat. And, you know, if one of the co-directors saw something that I missed, would you make that known to me now? Susan, unmute.
I was interested that both of our poets drew on Greek myth to some extent. We had Icarus falling in one of Beth's poems, and then we had Ulysses in one of Michael's poems. I think that adds music too, because you have the Greek names and the associations. And I'm interested in how you came to use myth in your poetry, or whether you've always read the classics, both of you, really.
You want to go first, Beth? Or, okay. I remember as a child having this Dual Airs illustrated Greek mythology, you know, with the wonderful beginning of Europa running off with Zeus and stuff in the beginning, and all sorts of the troubles from that. And I've always been deeply interested in those stories, and go back and read them again. And so there was always something in there that can frame kind of a contemporary or, you know, personal problem today. You know, some of these things are just, they come out of the fact that we're kind of living, thinking things in what is not necessarily, it's an organized but inchoate world, and how there's a lot that we have to resolve having to deal with that. You know, one day lunch, the next day an earthquake, you know. And that's kind of where a lot of that comes to me. And they also had some great insights into the just personal relations, how people dealt with one another.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I read certainly a lot of fairy tales and myths as a child. I've taught them at various points as well. And I find that there's a lot of wisdom in them, but then I also, for instance, in the last one, I feel that there's also things that don't apply. And perhaps as a woman, sometimes pushing back against some of those myths, I think is important. I just am not sure that they reveal experience as we actually know it sometimes. And so it's important to me to sort of find some cracks in them and question them a little bit. And I enjoy that, actually. That's just, those usually start as fun exercises, and then sometimes they turn into something and sometimes they don't.
Well, thank you for your question, Susan. And I think we probably have come to the end of the Q&A, and I thank both Beth and Michael for that. Anyway, also I wanted to make sure that we acknowledge Henry and all the work that he does, and some of the other people who are working behind the scenes, like Julian Berman and Renee Garrity and
Yes.
Leah Johnson. So thank you to all of our co-hosts and everybody, because without them, this program wouldn't be as smoothly done as we are doing it. So anyway, take it away, Susan. The end is yours.
Okay. Once more, thank you, all of you, for attending, and I hope that you enjoyed this evening's readings and readers, and will extend your enjoyment by purchasing books and letting others know about the series. Our next WordWorks program is part of our Poets versus the Pandemic series, and it'll be on Wednesday, November 18th at 7 p.m. when Indiana poet Dave Filippo will read from her terrific debut collection with guest appearances, brief ones, by local poets Anne Harding Woodworth and yours truly. And then on December 7th, Monday, this year's final Cafe Muse reading will feature poets Judith Bowles and Rose Solari. So please make sure that you've registered on our Cafe Muse website, and that way you will receive information on these events and others in the future, as well as the Zoom links to find them. Thank you again for coming, and please have a wonderful evening.